Did you ever think being a woman who wanted it all would be so hard? I didn't either. That's why my guests and I are unveiling the issues and challenging the norms of modern womanhood with the intention of exploring and publicly airing the uncomfortable and the unspoken. No topic is taboo as we search for answers to the questions that most people are too ashamed to ask. Welcome to Single at 30, the manual for the modern woman that we are writing together. So, are you in? Hello to my modern women. This is another episode that you voted for and another issue that I'm sure many of us struggle with on a daily basis, myself included. As always, please DM me with any feedback or episode ideas that you have, and like I mentioned in one of my recent Instagram posts, I'll be doing an episode for the Single at 30 Facebook group completely dedicated to responding to any topic ideas or questions you have. So guys, please don't forget to write into me about this. So John Lennon once said, "I'm not going to change the way I feel to conform to anything. I've always been a freak." His sentiment is something I both deeply connect with while at the same time question. In Western society, there's an ongoing narrative in the form of things like self-help books, podcasts, and celebrity tweets that says, don't care about societal norms, be yourself, and fuck the status quo. And this podcast is actually a part of that narrative, but today I wanted to fully air my thoughts on it. And spoiler alert, it's actually both good and bad. There's no doubt that I and most modern women have spent way too much of our lives giving a fuck about the shit society tells us to. And for those of you who have listened to my previous apps, you'll know I've explored many of the unfair pressures and expectations that we as modern women experience on a daily basis. But as a reminder, I recommend all men and women check out the video called Be a Lady, They Said. It's on YouTube and Vimeo and features Cynthia Nixon, who played Miranda in Sex and the City. Some of the expectations the video mentions include the societal requirements to not show so much skin, or not be so dressed up, or not let ourselves go, or not ask for it, or not be too fat but also not be too thin, or not show signs of aging but also to look natural, and to not sleep around but also be experienced. To make a good wife, take our husbands' last names, and to give our husbands children. And obviously, that's not all. It's interesting because a lot of you have written in and told me how you feel a lot of pressure from friends and family for being single or childless or divorced, etc., when you go to social events, and have even asked for advice on how to deal with those pressures. And while I'd like to say that I don't feel the pressure from any of these things, I absolutely do. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel the stress of things like having to be in shape 24/7. And now that I'm in my 30s, I worry about the threat of aging and potential fertility issues down the track. In my 20s, I felt the pressure to always be in a relationship and start thinking about children when really I wanted to be more focused on figuring out who I was and what sort of job didn't feel like I was selling my soul to the devil. On top of that, now that I'm 32, I worry about whether I will still have enough time to focus on my career and give it the energy it requires, whilst also having a fulfilling relationship. And when I speak to a lot of my friends, they feel the same way. And then based on feedback I've gotten from you guys, a lot of you do too. And like I've previously said, it's not actually our fault. From the moment anyone is born, they immediately enter a society and family unit with already established norms, laws, customs, traditions, and ways of behaving. These norms get reinforced as we grow up, and in the end, it can become extremely stressful to either live up to them or, if we want to in some cases, even challenge them. In response to all these expectations, a lot of self-help authors, celebrities, social media influencers, and business prodigies preach that we should stop giving a fuck about what other people think. They say just be ourselves and become non-conformists who forget about the status quo. Some of these influencers have especially strong views about how even being normal sucks. For example, I was recently reading Kelly Cutrone's book called Normal Gets You Nowhere, and she basically says that being normal is just plain bad and asks us all to take our chances and strive for brilliance so we can become successful, world-changing people who don't fit in and are definitely not normal. In fact, she says we need to raise an army of super talented uber freaks if we're ever going to really change the world, since it's only freaks who ever have. Although I was pumped while reading this, upon reflection, I actually don't think it's very helpful advice for all of us. The truth is, not everyone can be extraordinary, because if everyone were to become extraordinary, then by default, nobody would be extraordinary. And when I think about it, why should we all strive to become or even need to be world-changing superstars anyway? Like, sometimes it feels nice to fit in and be part of a tribe, and sometimes keeping your job to pay the bills rather than fighting the status quo is equally, if not more important. The truth is, I think it can often be easier to give a fuck and work within societal norms than to push against them and force ourselves not to. It's all about choosing which norms we think are worth fighting for and against. Like, do I think we need to fight against the idea that women should live their lives on some preconceived timeline that includes marriage and kids before 30? Fuck yes. Do I think people should be able to identify as whatever gender they choose? Absolutely. But do I mind eating with my mouth closed or saying please and thank you? No. I'm also fine with living in a society where it's not acceptable to walk around the CBD naked. So I guess the question is, how do we work out which societal norms we should identify with? How do we figure out what to stop giving a fuck about and what we should give a fuck about? Not surprisingly, Mark Manson has a few thoughts on this in his book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, which is quite an entertaining and informative read that you should definitely check out at some point. Mark's basic premise is that most of us struggle through our lives because we give too many fucks where fucks do not deserve to be given. He goes on to explain that we are all going to die one day and everyone we know is going to die, which means in the short time we have on Earth, we have limited fucks to give. And if we keep caring about everything and everyone without conscious thought or choice, we're basically screwed. He thinks we need to pick and choose what matters to us and what doesn't on the basis of carefully chosen personal values, rather than always relying on the values of those around us. He thinks we should care less about the superficial stuff, like rejections and supposed failures or the opinions of others, and instead we should care about things that truly matter, like doing what we believe in and learning how to overcome adversity. He also thinks our culture today is obsessed with unrealistic expectations and pathologically produces endless advice on how to be happier, healthier, and just generally better at everything. And ultimately, he thinks this fixation only reminds us of what we don't have, and I actually couldn't agree more. For example, the societal standard that women must be beautiful has caused literally millions of people to overcompensate for a perceived inadequacy by purchasing endless beauty products, resulting in it becoming a billion-dollar industry. And similarly, some of us spend hours in the gym or hire expensive PTs because we don't feel like we're toned enough. We read books on how to find love or become successful because we feel we need a relationship or lots of money to be happy. Basically, all the self-help advice telling us how to be great at all these things is just reinforcing what we don't have and saying that we need those things to be fulfilled. We need to be beautiful. We need to be fit. We need to find a partner and have lots of money. These expectations are so thoroughly ingrained in us. When COVID hit, one of my first thoughts was about things like my nails and my hair and laser and PT appointments. While trivial and definitely embarrassing to admit in the context of an international pandemic, I know I wasn't alone in that kind of thinking and that countless modern women freaked out. Like, I remember going to the chemist and seeing all of the hair removal, fake tan, and nail polish products sold out everywhere. While everyone was panicking about the great toilet paper drought, I seriously considered that I would have to go into hiding until lockdown was over due to fear of being seen naturally. And when I think about it, in many ways, this is the perfect example of giving a fuck about societal expectations. And yet, there are plenty of people who don't adhere to these norms and expectations and lead happy, fulfilled lives. They've chosen not to give a fuck about these specific expectations. Take Alicia Keys, for example, who in 2016 decided she would no longer be wearing makeup, something almost unheard of among most women, particularly in the entertainment industry. She chose to stop giving a fuck about the expectation that women use makeup to beautify themselves, and according to her, she's all the happier for it. Or look at Kate Wosley or Tess Holliday, the plus-size models challenging beauty norms. There's also Oprah Winfrey, who despite having a partner for over 30 years, hasn't met the societal expectation of marrying him because she realized she didn't really want to be a wife or have children and instead chose to focus on her career. Coco Chanel went against the norm and made it acceptable for women to dress like men. And then there's other celebrities who have spoken out against the prejudice directed at women, like Jennifer Aniston, who has been publicly attacked for not having children despite being very open about not wanting them, and Emma Watson, who coined the term self-partnered when she was previously single. We can do the same, Mark says. We don't have to keep giving a fuck about all these pressures, and maybe if we do stop caring, we'll be happier for it. And I agree, but I'm also fully aware it's not always that easy. Personally, I still care about the opinions of others and a lot of these expectations, and I don't think I'll suddenly not give a fuck about things like getting older anytime soon. That said, I think we should all try and care less, and we should definitely all reflect on why we do care about some things and not about others. In the end, life is a never-ending project, and while I don't think we'll ever find the perfect endpoint to a journey like this, I think we can day by day start aligning what we care about more with our personal values and less with what society thinks. According to Mark, there is no perfect way to do things, no exact list of things to give a fuck about or not give a fuck about. The reality is we can all end up with our own version of what to care about and what to ignore. Something the motivational speaker and serial entrepreneur Gary Vee once said that stuck with me is that people's fears are predicated on other people. He goes on to explain that too often we're allowing other people's opinions to dictate our lives, and he says that letting somebody else dictate your life results in immediate unhappiness because you lose control, and there is nothing harder than navigating your life based on somebody else's opinion. We only have one life, and it's much better to live it for ourselves than for somebody else. Again, we just have to choose what we care about carefully and make sure it's aligned with who we are and what we value, rather than exclusively relying on values we've been conditioned to have. And I guess once we know our values, we'll know what to give a fuck about and what to ignore. For example, I value purpose and therefore could never settle long-term for a job that lacks meaning. I also value integrity and therefore could never date someone for anything less than true love. And as vain as I am, I value my health and could never undergo any risky plastic surgery procedures. To work out what not to give a fuck about as modern women, you just need to figure out what really matters to you and stop listening to what everyone else says around you. If you don't want or even enjoy the company of children, then don't apologize for it. If you don't value monogamy, then don't feel pressured to commit to one partner. And if you do value your health, then be prepared to exercise even if sometimes it's a major pain in the ass. If you do value financial success, then be prepared to work hard for it. If you value the notion of finding the one, then be prepared to kiss a lot of frogs along the way. But in response to some of your questions about what to say to people when they ask about why you don't have kids, or why you're not married, or why you don't own a house yet, or how you're going to make a living when you're not killing it in your chosen career yet, the truth is I don't have an easy answer. It's fucking uncomfortable at the best of times, and sometimes you just feel like running away or attacking them for having the audacity to even inquire about such personal matters. But one thing I'm sure about is that no matter how uncomfortable you feel, you need to remember whatever values you have, it's not your job to make anyone else happy or to explain your life to anyone, whether you've hit certain milestones or not. You're not inferior to anyone, and you don't owe anyone an explanation, whether they're your friends, colleagues, or family. Whether you want to fuck the status quo like Kelly Cutrone wants you to, or whether you're happy to go along with it, the only person's approval you should be looking for in life is your own. Thank you so much for listening to this Single at 30 solo episode, How to Not Give a Fuck as a Modern Woman. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review and hit follow and subscribe. If you have any questions, feedback, or even an episode idea, DM me on Instagram at single_at_30, or join the Single at 30 closed Facebook group to become part of the community where, together with other like-minded modern women, we publicly air the uncomfortable and the unspoken. As always, no topic is taboo as we search for answers to the questions most people are too ashamed to ask. This is Single at 30, the manual for the modern woman that we are writing together.